Hi, welcome to Draw Process. I'm Ike. I'm going to draw my comic book, First Son and Sword. It's episode 2, page 32 today. I'll be drawing that from that drawing table, which I actually did, I think last week. And now I'm sitting here to do the voiceover where I'm going to share my thoughts, techniques, and process about my development. Here we go. Okay, first thing I do is mark out the page. I use a clipboard to hold the paper up, and I just set that clipboard on top of my drawing table. I used to use tape to hold it to the drawing table. I've used a T-square before, but I just used the triangle to make all of my right angles. I've got an inch dimension on each side, and then the top and bottom are 1 3/8 inches. I am, like always, doing my thumbnail on the page. I'm trying to just picture it. I probably took a few seconds, maybe even 30 seconds to just think. Sometimes I move my pencil while I'm thinking without it making any marks on the page. And I realized I wanted to just show a side view of the cart that they're on going downhill. And I thought that could be something a little different than usual. So I have a panel where the street that they're on that's going downhill is the bottom of the panel. And the panels beneath it match that angle. By having the cart sitting right on the bottom of the panel, that could have meant that the vanishing point, the horizon line, was right on the street there. I decided to put it a little below the street and have a bit of an angle looking up at the cart, giving it a little bit of three-dimensionality. It's not just a flat cart on a background. And you'll see here how the next 4 panels here follow that same curve. There's a little bit of a warping due to the camera being at an angle, but each of these panels is the same width. They're each 1/4 of the page. First panel is a nice close-up of both of our characters, their faces, their reaction. Sun is looking behind him to see the men following. And at this point when I'm drawing it, I really don't know exactly what's going to be in each of these 4 panels. I'm kind of making it up. You'll see I just turned his head. I erased it and drew it again because I realized I'm going to have him looking over his shoulder and show in the next panel the people behind him. That's about all I know at this point with my plan. So you'll see here I'm always working out the perspective and the basic composition, the basic blocking of where background elements are, where the edge of the street meets the buildings. And because I chose to put this on a hill, not only because for the story I wanted the cart to go quickly downhill, but it's more interesting that way. It looks visually more dynamic. Because of that, I have more than one vanishing point. It's this is not an instruction on drawing in perspective, but the kind of the default you might go to is having the vanishing point, the horizon line being the same as the level of the bottom of buildings. So obviously the top of door frames, windows, and so on, they're going to go to the actual horizon line, but the street, the bottom of buildings, does not always do that if they're on a hill. So there's a higher vanishing point that I'm using for the street. So we have a street view in the second panel there, little bitty men chasing them with a nice big word balloon. So you can make sure to let your eyes stop and see them. They're so small it's going to be harder for the eye to stop and look. And notice what I want you to notice there. This kind of establishing shot with figures in it, in the past I would have used a big panel to do that, but it takes a level of skill and confidence to do it in a really small panel. And like I was saying, the word balloon helps it work, helps make sure that you see what you need to see in that panel. What I've done here is I went up to the first panel again, and I was thinking that I might go ahead and turn this into a full bleed panel and let it go all the way to the edges, but I changed my mind and I erased the addition I had made, and I came back here. This jumping around is also somewhat making sure the buildings match, but it's not absolutely necessary that they look identical panel to panel. And now you see my pencil moving without even really touching the page. I'm just trying to figure out what I want to draw. They're coming down the hill. They're coming towards an intersection that's going to be busy. How do I, picture this and start to build it? So I want the traffic at the bottom of the intersection to look large, like a nice big wall of people and things that look big and intimidating because he's running into it with the cart. I didn't want it to look small and easy to get through. So I have a very low vanishing point so that we're kind of looking up at this crowd, and I have him pushed towards the bottom of the panel. Because the street is on a hill, he's coming down the hill, we can show Sun and the cart and sword, we can show them above the line of people, visually above, higher, on a higher plane, because they're up on the hill. So I immediately started with the street and a low vanishing point, which I just adjusted just now. You'll notice I just moved it. I don't let my vanishing point stay the same as I'm building the drawing. There's no reason to let that dictate the composition when I can just move it into something that fits a little bit better. What we have here is a crowd, some bulls or oxen being pulled behind a cart, like a wagon. And then the wagon's going to be full of something and with a man driving it. And that is kind of the cube shape on the right. And then I have the series of buildings of different heights and shapes. Now, as I'm doing this, I don't want, I'm trying to make sure this wall of buildings is not just a wall. So you'll notice that the building in the middle, I've opened up some space to the right. I've not let it be too wide of a building. I've kept it narrow so that there's room for some sky and background, further back plane in the top right, just to open it up and make it feel like space and not just a block of building. And here I'm just constructing spaces. I'm looking, if I'm on my phone, I'm either, which I am here, I'm either answering a text or something, or maybe looking up buildings from earlier panels I had done, reminding me of how I drew these buildings a little further up the hill, so that maybe there's some consistency there. I also looked up how to draw the ox. So I was looking up, different species or kinds, and there's one in Africa that looked really cool, kind of a water buffalo, you could say. So I just found a few shots of that as reference to give me an idea of the shape and structure of it. I didn't have to do that. I could have done it from imagination, but sometimes just a little extra knowledge that you can apply, a little extra detail, character that you can give those things is nice. Here the buildings are going to a vanishing point in the center of the panel, but I have the cart going to a vanishing point to the left. Because the cart is in the center of the panel and I want it to have three-dimensionality, and not look flat. I've moved its vanishing point to the left, allowing us to see two sides of it. And of course, that means that it's traveling, at an angle. It's traveling to the left down the street. But maybe they're wobbling back and forth. It's not a big deal. But it looks better. When it comes to throwing in just people in the crowd, that's something I'm getting a little better at over time. But I have I've had a habit of drawing people just a little too simple. There's not enough unique qualities to the people in the crowd, and not even much effort into their anatomy, their structure of the people. And sure, if they're small enough, I can't add a lot of detail, and it's okay to make kind of a square with legs and a head. But I noticed on this page, I started putting a little more work, or being a little happier with what I did with the background characters, especially when they're in the foreground in the last panel. I can't just let characters or the people of the city should not be so generic that there's no character to the city, so they don't feel real. So I think I am getting better at adding that character. This page took a little longer than some pages I've done. I think part of that is that there's a lot of cityscape. The environments being more detailed like that does take more time to draw. But it's also the way that I'm inking lately takes more time. There's more lines, there's more detail in the inks. And I'm happy with that. I like how it looks, but I would say it's taking a little longer. I think if I'm doing the math right, if I remember correctly, the sped up video came out to around 50 minutes, which is around 4 hours from start to finish on the page. And for me, that's a while. That's longer than usual. 2.5 to 3.5 hours is more typical. Which had me just realizing that sometimes fiddling with a page with little touch-ups and changes using whiteout paint can add 30 minutes or an hour to my time. I mean, it has happened before, but I'm not doing that as much lately. Lately there's been, and I think it's this new way of inking, I'm paying attention to each line I put down. Before I could just let my hand move quickly. And then I might regret a move that I made. But now, there's very little editing I need to do. Okay, in these pages, in these two middle panels, they have a similar shape. I'm always conscious of that to try to vary the dynamic between the overall kind of feel of the shape, or the vector of the panel between each panel. The first one is more sideways, left to right. The next one is kind of north-south with a diagonal to it. And so is the one after that. But I tried to make it a more clear, different look. And then the last panel gets to more of a dead-on kind of block. Trying to vary that. By framing this shot the way I did, you cannot see any buildings to the left of them as they come down the hill. Because of the angle I chose, I was aware that if I put any building on the left, because the vanishing point is further to the left than the buildings are, then if I were to show the buildings, you would not, unless, like, if they're in a straight line, you're not going to see any of them except the one in the very front. because the other ones would be behind it and hiding behind it. So I was aware that I wasn't going to be able to put those buildings there. And so, and I didn't want just a block of a building on the left, hiding our view of things down the street, going up the hill there. So those are the sort of things I have to consider and like work with as I'm building the page. Some of these scribbles are finding shadows, areas that like value light to dark. And some of this is like details architecturally or whatever. I'm getting pretty good about not adding a lot of details in pencil and just doing it in the inks. This is more like just, a line, a marking point of where there's going to be a detail, but then I'll put the detail in inks. Right now I am drawing something and I don't know what exactly is going to be here. I've very loosely put in some forms, but I don't really know what the details are. What are the saddlebags going to look like? How are these oxen actually roped together and actually, I think at first I wasn't going to have them tied to the wagon in front. They were just going to be walking along. And I realized it made more sense when I think of this world as lived in. What are these people here doing? It made more sense to have these oxen being roped behind a wagon. I would think if you're traveling through a busy city, you would keep them tied up. You wouldn't just have them free walking, and best not just tied to each other, but tied to a wagon. So I'm thinking about the world that they live in. Same with the buildings, thinking about how these spaces are lived in when I imagine them. But I'm trying to be quick about it too, to not spend a lot of time imagining that world, just very quickly in the moment. What would they be wearing and so on. If I get stumped, I don't want to waste time being stumped. So if I have to look up reference, say for this woman's dress, which I didn't, but if I had to look something up, I would just look. Then you just have to know when to stop, when you need a reference, like with the ox. And you'll see, I'm remembering where my vanishing point is, and decided to draw a man walking next to her and give him a bag on his back that he's holding. Who knows what's in it? So maybe some bread or something. And then messed around with what hat he might be wearing, kind of changing his clothes as I go. I like drawing that way. It's nice to just quickly erase something and throw in another little detail. I'm really building the world out the same way that I might scribble in a figure and then add some detail, like the muscles and structure more clearly, and clothing. But the same way you can add those details on a human form. I treat everything that way. You can add some details in on everything and that's also why I like to let my pencils look so loose and rough. If I were to have really clean drawings of people and of things in the comic, it would be really hard to just build my way to the things and erase and add it again to kind of come up with these details. If you don't know what you're drawing, it's harder to draw with a really polished, straightforward, structural approach to the drawing. So the organic approach that I have seems to be fitting me well for the world building that I enjoy doing. And it used to be, challenging, maybe not something I would say I enjoy, but I really do enjoy it now. And it came with, practice and confidence at drawing, drawing figures, drawing in perspective, having just a little bit of baseline, kind of habit memorization around buildings and people and clothing and stuff. This helps, for sure, me feel, more free to express myself, to be creative with it. If you are too burdened by the basics, it's really hard to be creative in any field, in any task you're doing. So you've got to get some comfort with the basic mechanics of it before you can really be creative. And at the same time, people tend to lose their creativity with something when they're too familiar with it. That the more creative ideas might come from somewhat of an outsider, and we can become complacent in what we're doing. I've been experiencing that in a way with my counseling business lately. I've suddenly, well, it's not that sudden, but I've really realized now that I need to grow my business and approach it differently. Some of that is changes in the family and the household. And I need to work more and I need to grow that practice, but it's easy to become complacent. And this is what I do. This is how I do it. This is who I see. This is how much I charge. And these are the ways people can pay without insurance, whatever. Or, this is the location of my office. Even that, these are all questions that, I wasn't asking myself. I just could get comfortable and say, this is fine. I'll just keep doing this and not say, hey, wait a minute. Maybe the horizon goes a lot further than I think it does. That's really been a theme lately for me. Not only in that, but everything, like what I'm doing with the Clever Kaiju community. We have Brian Atkins. If you haven't heard, he's a comic artist and educator for comic art. Very seasoned and professional guy. But he wanted to teach something, teach comic art to our community and to the public, but with our community. He's in our community, and so he's a part of us anyways. But that's the sort of thing that we could have drug our heels on. We could have thought, that could be nice someday, or we could daydream about it. But to really be like, let's take the leap. Let's do this. What are we not doing that we could be doing? It might take a little legwork, but it really may not be that much to just be more active, be oriented towards action instead of status quo or comfort or whatever. So, it's happening in a lot of areas of my life right now. And I'm not even sure why it's happening so broadly in so many areas. I don't think it's simply a matter of health, mental health or something, or the summer season. But it's definitely a theme of things lately. But I do want to mention that again, though. Brian Atkins is going to be teaching today. If you're listening to this the first day it comes out, July 21st, we've got a Zoom lesson with him. You can see that at cleverkaiju.com. It's free, and we'll record it and hopefully be able to share that later, because we want to show people show some of it later. We're going to record the lecture portion, not the hands-on portion with the participants. But we want to share that with people and get people to sign up for the full course, which is going to be one meeting a month through the fall, starting in August. But check that out. I'm really involved in it. I'm really excited about it, and eventually I'll teach something on there. But right now I'm just happy to help my friends do it. Help the community, do this together. Learn something together from each other, and I think that's great. It's very different to learn something in a community than by yourself. When our whole community can learn something together, which is it's a Discord community primarily, but we do in-person stuff for sure. But when you learn things together, it is the DNA of who you are. It starts to become the shared language. And that's what makes, a unique community, a culture, is you have a shared language. So it's just way cooler to learn with a community than on your own. So that was a bit of a tangent, but on theme of realizing I can grow. I can be looking at a brighter horizon, a further horizon, and not just what's right in front of me, toiling in the dirt, that's right in front of me. And that applies directly to the art too. You'll notice how much my art has changed in the past, few months. And even after, 10 years of doing this, it's changing quickly sometimes. And sometimes it's static. It's more crystallized, stays put. And then obviously there's times where there's more of a leap. But it's somewhat of an active choice on my part. It's a choice to try to stay in a place that's a little uncomfortable, a place where change is possible, where I'm looking and expecting change, something to happen. Yeah, looking ahead, much ahead, not just right in front of me. And in that is kind of your ego getting out of the way, because you can't look at your current art and try to judge, is it good or bad? How good is it? What's my value? Questions around what's your value is static. That's like trying to judge something like it's finished, But this is looking at it with fresh eyes, looking at it for what it could become that it isn't yet, and trying to imagine that, see what it could be. So I've been trying to listen to that and go that path, and it's been great. And I try to always keep that in mind, always try to do that. And yeah, I'm happy with the results so far with this latest development. Coming in here with the nib, laying in shadows, textures, detail. Typically starting at the top left of the panel and working my way over, because I don't want to wipe the spread wet ink with my hand. That's the main reason I do that. And when I'm inking, I know that my pencils aren't so perfect, so I'm trying to I'm not just tracing, I'm paying attention to where is the vanishing point? Are these lines as straight as they should be or not? So I will change them as needed. Sometimes little bitty details. I mean, just like small things make a difference. These buildings just have a little change in the architecture around the corners, around changes in floors. There's a few little birds in the sky. Just a few little things that help it not just feel like boxes. Just too simple. You'll see that I've got the background visual planes finished basically, and I'm coming down to the the foreground where the crowd is in the way. I will admit I don't know what happens in the next page yet, which I will probably draw tomorrow, but at least most of it. But I don't know exactly how they're gonna run into this crowd and how that might look. But there's a lot of fun things I can imagine happening here. Story-wise, we are just to recap here. The main push here, the impetus for their action is Sword needs medicine. He's sick and with an infection, and Farah is off trying to find the medicine. And now she's heard the alarm horn ring, and she's rushing to try to help them. And we also know that the men of the city, whether they're the grunt workers or the actual soldiers, or Kurok the man-eater, the lizard man that's the formidable force for this episode, they're all honing in on Sun and Sword as they're running away down the street. So a lot of tension building, and everyone will come to a head in one location, and we'll see how it plays out. I try to think of these things. I don't know if I'm a great storyteller or a great writer of stories. I think I'm a decent storyteller because that involves how I handle the telling of the story, but the quality of the stories themselves, I think I'm still trying to improve in that area. But some other things I think about in this story is not just the kind of building of tension to the climax, and how they might be thwarted in their initial goal, and how that's going to seem like a failure until they find a different way of meeting the goal. But I'm trying to think of the other things that are kind of in the story arc for the characters that have been introduced, that I've tried to introduce in the issue. So we definitely have something going on where Farah is very guarded, closed off, mean and distrusting of Sun, and Sun is feeling very not incapable, very childish and incapable of surviving and of taking care of Sword. And so they each have their own issue, but they have an issue with each other. They're the main point of conflict that we've established for this issue. And for Sword, there's not much going on other than he's got a fever and he was having a dream. So we know that he's got a kind of story arc, at least with his dream. And just sort of, his story, but it's not clear yet how that will tie into this, what's happening here in this story, in the present. But I plan on finding a way. I mean, I have an idea. I have a script I've written and edited a few times, but I think I can improve it still. As the story comes to life, it speaks to me, so I change it. You will notice here coming in with the brush, I chose not to zoom in at all on this part so that you can get the overall feel of what I'm doing, because this is what I'm looking at. I'm finding some areas to add solid black, but it's not a ton. It's just the darkest areas, and you'll notice how much of a difference it makes. Things start to really have depth or pop with just that small addition of black. And, I've always, and especially in the past, my style has had a lot of black, a lot of blocks of black, solid black, and simple line work. I'm finding in my in my current development, my current style of inking, there's some unique ways that I am handling inking things. And it has to do with how much time I spent approaching things the way I was, and my lack of traditional inking techniques. I never approached it in a classical manner. So you take that and you mix it with the heavy blacks, and you get something like this that has unique solutions to shadows and textures and stuff. There's some amount of indication of like hair and folds and clothes, but it's done in a different manner than you would typically see. And some of that is stuff I'm going to improve on, but some of it gives it character, I feel. If I just did it in a true like classical approach, it would lose some of that character too. But yeah, it makes it unique. It would be hard for someone to just copy the way I ink or how I draw with my ink, because it's too much unique to just specific to my tastes, my background, and so on. But that's what I like. I think we need more of that. I think in the future we need a lot more unique expressions, and not just relying on classical or traditional techniques. Which means we need a new language on how we judge and talk about what we're doing. And here is the finished page. I'm just using a little bit of light, a little bit of a lighting layer and a shadow layer. But yeah, I really like that. The characters in the foreground, I left them a little bit sketchy, not too much detail in them. Like I was saying, I try to add some unique features to these characters, but I'm not wanting to make them too interesting, too specific in the quality of the inking, let's say. So they kind of just blend in as a block, as a crowd here, the way that I chose to draw them. But there it is, finished page. A fun little panel at the top, nice angle there, cascading down, and the final panel kind of repeats that angle, left to right and down. The colors try to follow, like the more rich blues and greens will function as focus points with a little bit of sort of red accent that's kind of balanced throughout. But yeah, I think that's it for this week. I'm going to keep being the practice of my art, doing the best I can with that, with how my life's been getting so busy, but I will be sticking with it. I encourage you to do the same. Share your practice. See you next week.